Hello. It's Sunday. I'm CJ. Just before I kind of get started on this one, trigger warning people, I guess, because I'm going to talk about addiction and I'm going to talk about drugs and I'm going to talk about inner city living. Just if those are topics that you can't, please, I won't take it personally. Please take care of yourselves and I will speak to you next week. This week we are talking about safe spaces and alcohol-free spaces. If you identify, I suppose, as other, the likelihood that you will have experimented with drugs and alcohol much younger is substantially higher than for people who aren't. And I definitely fall into that category. So I'm from a working class inner city northern town that's not really famous for anything except every few years or so we like to make pop stars. Kimberly from Girls Aloud, Gareth Gates, of course Zayn Malik, and there isn't a lot there. Things have changed slightly now, but certainly when I was growing up, drinking was like the only thing that there really was to do. So I really started drinking when I was about 14, which, you know, it's not just it's not just that I'm queer, you know, I have a lot of I have issues with PTSD, I have some other stuff that my brain has difficulties handling, and for me it was always very much a case of being like, alcohol is one of those places where I could socialise like a normal human being. Because I'm actually not a particularly outgoing person. I am, like, when I'm, you know, when I'm making videos and talking to my camera or to the dog, I'm obviously on, but you know, there's weeks when I'm not here and those weeks when I haven't made videos and whatever are because I'm very much in my own head and not leaving it. When I get the balance right, it's amazing, but the ease with which you can get that balance really, really wrong is very high. By the time I was about 16, 17, drugs were in the picture because a lot of the friends that I had did drugs. So I grew up very, very comfortable with this scene of substances. I think that's maybe made me even more passionate about how important it is to have safe spaces away from alcohol. You know, I live in London. For all that it's fantastic, it's very, very, very hard to be queer and sober. It's so significant, I think, to have those moments where you can sit in a room and simply by electing to be there, you're saying something about yourself, but you don't have to say the words. And that, to me, is the definition of a safe space. It's knowing that you can be in an environment and you can talk about things with so much of it unsaid. I think with much less of a reliance on assumptions and people knowing to ask questions. And it can be things as simple as like knowing to ask what your pronoun is, or if you're talking about a partner, or if you're talking about attractions, or if you're talking about experiences, allowing you to talk about those facets of yourself that I certainly, in the majority of my life, am unable to talk about. I suppose for me, the biggest thing that I have that really backs it up is how important FTM Transtastic is to me, and the Tumblr community, and all of the spaces that I've been involved with and in since I really came out and started processing this. Suddenly, for one of the first times of my life, I was around people who were teetotal, who had never touched drugs or drink, whose attitude towards it was as likely to be ambivalent or disinterested as it was to be engaged. Those of you who've seen my hungover videos know that I still partake. It's amazing if you can do it in a space that's safe and you feel comfortable, and I'm very lucky because I have a group of friends that I go out socialising with who are also there the rest of the time during the week. You know, they're not just party friends, they are very real, very deep friendships. And, you know, I have some friends who are recovering addicts, and we find it difficult to know spaces that we can sort of be around. It tends to be dominated a lot more by being in somebody's house. And the difficulty with that is that you then become antisocial because sociability becomes synonymous with alcohol enjoyment, and I guess if you're not an addictive personality, then that's fine, but if you're an addictive personality, you're in huge trouble. I suppose my main plea for these spaces, for queer spaces, like, yes, in an ideal world, everywhere would be a safe space, but we don't live in that world, and we fundamentally don't live in that world, and we will not live in that world for a very, very long time. So trying to kind of make the best of what you've got with what's around, I think, means making sure that we have safe spaces that are skewed aggressively towards minorities. I hate the word minorities. I really, really hate that word minorities, because I don't think we are. And I think if you take the entire spectrum of minorities, actually what you're talking about is a much larger group of people statistically than anybody is aware of, but because we don't talk about the experience, we don't know. Total digression. It breaks up this homogenized mess of there is one way to do this, there is one way to be this, there is one way to live, and sort of blasts it wide open. I think we do need to have those spaces where alcohol isn't a requirement, or that people feel like they don't have to take alcohol. Oh, they don't have to take the alcohols. I'm so tired. So we need to have these spaces where people don't feel like they have to be drinking to have a good time, and that it's completely okay and reasonable, and you'll see other people who are on soft drinks or drinking water, and it's not like you're a stick in the mud, and there's no value judgment placed on that. Like with so many things, the argument of we don't need these spaces tend to be made by people who don't need these spaces, and that's fine. It's totally fine if there's queer spaces that you don't want to go to. There's lots of queer things that I don't want to go to. I can think of any number of them that I have been invited to and thought, oh, thank you. I'm not that kind of queer. Because that's not what I want to do, pretty much, and so I don't. And I think there is very much that space of going, like, but that doesn't mean that I don't think they should exist. You know, there absolutely should be, like, a queer mountaineers group. I just don't personally want to go to it. So I think sometimes we have to be really careful how we conflate the need for something with our own personal agenda. As humans, I think it's probably our duty to make sure that we are looking out for people who need a thing and making sure that that thing is readily available, without the sort of, oh, fine, all right, you can have this attitude. You know, and on an individual level, keep an eye on your drinking. If it starts to become something that's more necessary, please try and get help. Remember that a safe space doesn't have to be a geographical location. The internet is an amazing wonderland. Sure, it's the Wild West sometimes, but it's an amazing resource that we have where you don't have to be alone. If loneliness and that feeling of being alone is something that you're suffering with, reach out and talk to people, because it's really easy to get locked into your own head. There's no shame to be had in making use of the resources that are out there. But that's it from me. I hope you all have a lovely week, and I will talk to you next weekend. Goodbye.